Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are here for the very first edition of the Commissioner's Corner. Oops.
Can't hear you, NK.
Boom. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Now,
Well,
what did you
technically.
say?
All right, cool. I'll redo it. I have to do the
There you
intro
go.
right. I have to do the intro right. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here for the very first edition of the Commissioner's Corner. I am your host of the most, NK, man of the hour, too sweet to be sour. But I am not alone. I am joined with the Pro Wrestling Encyclopedia, the UK's number one black historian when it comes to wrestling. I'm with my guy, Knowledge. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. I'm just relaxed on my sofa. I've got wrestling on the TV in front of me. Got Ric Flair against Barry Windham from
Oh,
1986. I got
yeah.
three dogs. I got three dogs down here, and two of them, one of them will, I'm sure, sit next to me on the sofa. You'll probably see him at some point. But like, yeah, I'm chilling, bro. How are you today? What's been happening?
I'm chilling, man. I'm chilling. There's been a lot just happening in life and just wrestling. I've just been reading through hella articles today because it's been a very newsworthy week in the pro wrestling business indeed.
It's always these days. It's always a bloody newsworthy week in wrestling. I mean, you don't get quiet weeks in wrestling. It's like
Now you don't.
you can have a massive story, and then 2 days later, it'll be something you just can move on completely onto something else. And by the end of the week, you won't even remember what was the big story at the beginning of the week.
Yeah. Nah, it's a mad week. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, we like to do a little segment called Champ of the Week. Champ of the Week is where we highlight someone that, in the wrestling business where we think they deserve some accolades, they deserve some praise for their contributions to wrestling this week. My champ of the week is probably Mercedes Moné. Reason why? As a woman, she managed to negotiate and have two of the biggest pro wrestling companies essentially engage into a bidding war against her. And we know that she's going to be on a very lucrative deal in AEW. And that's kind of the benefit of having two companies in this business. It's the fact that the wrestlers are able to leverage these two companies against each other and make more money than they've ever made. So, especially with the introduction of like TV rights and just there's more money in pro wrestling than there's ever been. And the fact that the talent these days are able to make as much money as they possibly can. And to do that as a woman in this business where 30, 40 years ago, women weren't seen as a commodity and asset in this business. So the
30,
fact you
40
have
years,
even 10 years ago.
way, up to recent, up to in recent modern times or whatever, like women weren't really seen as anything bar like, Sable or somebody,
Yeah.
But yeah, she's done really well for herself. I tell you, I don't know what she's got, but I know it's a lot. And she's played her cards right, boy. Really has. So yeah, big up to her, man.
Yeah, man. So Mercedes, she's definitely my champ of the week this week. Knowledge, you got any notable recommendations for champ of the week?
Mate, if I started the people that I've watched some decent wrestling in the last week or whatever.
Yeah.
So let's say Hechicero or Brian Danielson, because I watched the Danielson Zack Sabre Jr. match last night, which was absolutely incredible. That is Zack Sabre Jr. I mean, he's been fantastic forever, but I mean, like that match was so good.
Yeah, phenomenal. Phenomenal
wrestling match. Absolutely fantastic.
That match was an absolute advertisement for like for great technical wrestling and professional wrestling as a whole. So Danielson, Zack Sabre Jr. Both men in that match deserve all the accolades that they deserve.
I haven't watched the War Games match. I haven't watched that yet. I just haven't had a chance. I know it's long. It's an hour and 4 minutes.
Yeah,
I just haven't had an hour and 4 minutes.
Like personally speaking, I think it kind of overstays its welcome.
I heard it goes.
Yeah, it kind of. Yeah, it kind of overstays its welcome. I think it's probably the best modern War Games match in terms of like post WWE reintroducing the concept and post AEW Blood and Guts. I think it's probably like either the best one or one of the better ones that the modern era has seen. But I do think it's like I said, it overstayed its welcome in a few spots. The match could have ended like 10, 15 minutes earlier and it would have been perfect. But I think it's a perfect send off for Will Ospreay.
Yeah, I mean, what a career, what a run he's had.
Mm-hmm.
And he's 30. Absolutely. Yeah. I know he's 30 years old. So much more to give as well. Like the next year or so, because he said that he's not working for New Japan for the rest of the year. He said he's going to focus on AEW. So he told Dave Meltzer that he's not focusing on New Japan. He just wants to focus on AEW. So I'm sure he'll be back next year. But I mean, it's just the fact that he stayed for so long as well. Foreign wrestlers don't stay in promotions for that long. I mean, obviously, I can think of a few, but of the modern era.
No, you'd have to go back to like what
at that level. Obviously, Owens has been there longer than him.
But, I think when you think of like prominent like gaijins who were like almost became elder statesmen of the company, who are we thinking of? Are we thinking of like the Stan Hansons? Are we thinking who
Stan Hansen? Stan was a guy that I immediately thought of, but Stan, that was a different era where the money in Japan was substantial. Getting one of those top foreign spots in a Japanese company was way more lucrative than working for one of the major promotions in America. So, there wasn't many of those spots. So when Stan Hansen had one, or Bam Bam Gordy had one, or Furnace and Crowfoot, when they had those spots, they weren't letting go of those unless they had to. They stayed in those companies for a long time. And in New Japan, Scott Norton had a job, to be fair, for years in New Japan. I mean, he worked for WCW primarily for a lot of that run, but he still worked for New Japan for at least, I don't even know how long he worked, like 15 years probably. Like, he was there for that long. But I mean, I will check out that War Games match. I'll probably watch it tonight. The thing is, my son wants to watch it, and he's more social than I am. He's a busy guy. He's not like me, But yeah, today, bit of history for you. Today is the 41st anniversary of David Von Erich's death.
Oh wow!
Yeah, he died 41 years ago today in Japan. So that was a massive story in wrestling. So I was actually thinking about that because I didn't realize the date until I saw it on the internet. I was like, wow, 41 years ago. David died, but that was a big deal because his death, he was the first of the wrestling Von Erichs to pass. And it was a kind of a domino effect into the fortunes of that family, because he was probably going to be a world champion. He was probably going to beat Harley Race at some point for the NWA title, which at that time was the most prominent championship in America. And he was a really hot baby, really good worker, David Von Erich. If you watched him, he was a really, really good worker. Yeah. For
if
that
you
time,
could recommend like a few David Von Erich matches to me and the people, like what matches would you say are noteworthy?
Oh, he had a few of Harley Race in Kansas City. Off the top of the dates, I wouldn't even have a clue. They're out there though. You can find them on YouTube. He had a couple matches with Ric Flair that went an hour. That was really good as well. At that time. But yeah, there was David was a really good wrestler, but he passed. He died in Japan. You can argue about how he passed away. There's so many different stories and theories that I heard about how he passed away. I won't get into that here, but he passed away, and his funeral was one of the biggest funerals in the history of Dallas. He had over 5,000 people at his funeral, and that led to the super famous Ric Flair Kerry Von Erich match at Texas Stadium, which at the time, for many years actually, was the most attended wrestling show in Dallas. They did 32,000 people. And Kerry beat Ric Flair for his first world title. And it's like one of the greatest moments in wrestling, in Texas wrestling, was when he won that title, because the pop of that audience was just incredible. Absolutely incredible. And there's a moment where Kerry walks out the ring and he's got his world title, because the Von Erichs, that was a story which Von Erich was going to win the world title, because Fritz never won it. And he's walking out of the ring with this NWA world title. And his mum, Fritz, his mum and his dad, Fritz and Doris, they're walking towards him. And Fritz, he catches eyes with Fritz, and wrestling was real at that moment. It's just one of those moments I'll never forget, the way they looked at each other. He was so proud of Kerry that night. It was absolutely fun. And then Kerry cut this promo backstage, thanking the fans and people of Dallas, and they were all there, and Fritz looked so proud of him. I hear people talk about cinema these days. That is fucking cinema. Then Kerry won the world title. But anyway,
yeah.
David Bonner 1 year ago today.
Nah, man. I'll definitely check out some more Von Erich stuff. Obviously, they've risen into prominence about Iron Claw, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point.
We'll talk about that. Don't get me worked up, okay?
Yeah. But I think the main topic on the agenda today is AEW big business. Of course, on the most recent episode of AEW Dynamite, Tony Khan announced that he will be hosting a show at the TD Garden Arena entitled Big Business in Boston. Now, obviously, the rumors and speculation have pretty much all but pointed to Sasha Banks, Mercedes Moné being debuted and unveiled at Big Business. And now a recent report from Andrew Zarian came out yesterday stating that Kazuchika Okada is AEW bound. And we also know that Will Ospreay is a full-time member of the All Elite roster, and he completed his final dates in Japan this past weekend. So we could be potentially having Mercedes Moné, Will Ospreay, and Kazuchika Okada at AEW. There was a recent tweet from a quote, let's say, Twitter personality called Raj Giri, basically questioning what money these people like Mercedes, Okada, and Will Ospreay could bring to AEW. How do these affect the business of AEW per se? Because Mercedes has been proven to be a ratings draw in WWE. She drew some of the highest quarters on WWE television. Okada, obviously, we know about his pull in Japan, and it was heavily speculated when Ring of Honor and New Japan were doing the super shows in the US. It was heavily attributed to Okada that he sold out Madison Square Garden. So we know he's like...
That show was sold on the strength of Kenny Omega and Okada in the main event. That was the main event of the show.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be the main event. Okada was always supposed to be the main event of that show.
Yeah.
Obviously, it never worked out that way.
Yeah.
But he drew the house that night.
Yeah. And then Will Ospreay, obviously, like, Will Ospreay is granted as like one of the best wrestlers in the world. I don't think there's much data in terms of like how much of a draw he is, unless you can fill me in on like any information on that. But Will Ospreay is like a pretty popular wrestler in general, but in terms of his drawability, it's kind of, I wouldn't say an unproven asset, but it's just there's just not enough.
At the highest level, I mean, Will Ospreay doesn't have a track record of being a draw. I mean, like he's worked big houses. I mean, he's worked Tokyo Domes and he's worked Forbidden Door twice. And I'm sure that the Forbidden Door shows, they were pretty much sold out before any matches were advertised. Yeah. But obviously they were sold on the strength of people like him being there and Okada being there, and, you know, probably Naito as well to some degree, as well as the stars of AEW as well. But, you know, I think it's an interesting conversation to have. I find it hard to believe Will is a draw. SDK says, I find it hard to believe Will is a draw. Yeah, I mean, I've seen Will Ospreay wrestle in front of sold-out houses over here, but I've also seen Will Ospreay wrestle, you know, over here in very light houses. Yeah. So, you know, we're going to find out how big of a draw Will Ospreay is at some point. I don't even know if it's now in AEW, if I'm honest, but it's a good question. Raj says that. I don't know what his motivation is in saying that, but
even just speaking to like AEW as a whole, let's talk about like the TD Garden Arena. I think that big business show has sold, I think, close to 5,000 tickets.
They done 50. I think it was like 5,800 last time I checked. That was yesterday. They did about
So they've
100.
done north of that. And ticket sales, the pre-sales are good, but the question is, will the strength of a Mercedes Monet alone be able to pack in that building? Because we'll get to it later on as well, but there's been an issue when it comes to like AEW moving tickets for some of their big for some of these dynamite houses. When it comes to like internationally, of course, they can hand their head high with shows like All In, which was a tremendous success, and even Revolution has sold out. But when it comes to like the dynamite and certainly some of these collision shows, there's been a question of like drawing and filling up these houses.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens when you're number 2 in the market, unfortunately. That's where we're at right now with AEW, and also WWE are so hot right now. I mean, they were getting lighter at the end of the year, but then Punk showed up, and then those, they seem to have gotten a second lease of life after Punk showed up. But yeah, that's just the struggles of being the number 2 wrestling promotion, unfortunately. I mean, I think, don't get me wrong, it's a bit more than that. I think there's a lot more to AEW not drawing that well for collisions, especially Collision, but for Dynamites and Collisions recently. A bit more than just not being number 2. I think there's a few things that we can discuss relating to that. We'll get onto that in a minute, actually. But as far as what they bring to AEW, those 3, if I'm honest with you, at this stage, I actually don't know. And I'm not saying that they're not going to be helped, because Mercedes, Okada, and Will Ospreay are obviously 3 fantastic. Well, 2 of them are 2 of the greatest wrestlers of all time. And Mercedes is, she's a star, super charismatic. She's a really good wrestler as well. And like you said earlier on, she's a proven ratings draw. At one time in WWE, she was the top ratings mover in the company, even past Roman Reigns when he had that Needle Mover T-shirt. Like she was the number 1 person in the company as far as her rating spikes. But you got to think that was a while ago now. We're 2 years past that, and so we actually don't really know what Mercedes has got. They sold only 6,000 tickets for the sale of the Boston Garden show, which is a nice number. I mean, Punk did more than that. Obviously, Punk's a bigger star than she was, and Punk had been away a lot longer. But I see people making the comparison, so it's unfair for me to not mention it. I mean, they've got the house set up for 9,000 seats. They'll get 9,000 easily.
Yeah. Isn't TD Garden Arena close to like 19,000?
I think it's like 17,000.
17,000.
But even if they opened up all the seats, they'd still need to probably remove 2,000 to 3,000.
Yeah, due to production, LED staging, and so on and so forth. Yeah,
all that stuff. So they probably would get a maximum of 14,000, which we'll see how it goes. I mean, they have the thing with AEW, and it's quite interesting, because when Tony Khan did the announcement on television, we discussed this earlier on, because we knew. I told you what the announcement was going to be earlier on anyway, and it's like, okay, this is what it's going to be. The interesting thing about the whole announcement was whether or not he was going to announce her name.
Yeah,
which they never did, and they still haven't. Obviously, the poster's got the word "boss" on it, and
it's everything but announcing her name at this point.
Yeah, and I would have personally have advertised. I would have said, "Look, she's going to be here on this date," and I mean, they can still do it. I mean, 2 weeks time, they could just run a video and say she's going to be here, because I don't know. There are a lot of people I've seen people actually still uncertain about whether or not she's going to be there. If you go into the depths of wrestling Twitter, you'd find these people. So I mean, it's like maybe it's not too blatant enough, but I think they can still pull that out of the hat.
Yeah, I think it's obvious they're trying to use the same tried and tested method they did with CM Punk, which created such an uproar. But I think that method with Punk, I'm not saying it can't work with Mercedes, because it has worked to a degree, because it's created a lot of buzz, a lot of uproar. There was a lot of like joy when that show was announced. But the thing about Punk, like you said, he's quite frankly a bigger draw. But it was also the factor of this guy had been absent for close to a decade of professional wrestling.
Yeah.
So his return to wrestling isn't just based on the fact that he is a draw. It's the fact that this is somebody who's been so absent from the business, and people have like almost an otherworldly attachment to CM Punk as a figure in pro wrestling, and he'd been so, you know, anti WWE during his tenure. It kind of just added to there were a lot of like different factors that led to that debut being so tremendous. And I think Mercedes is an amazing acquisition. No shadow of a doubt. I just think when it comes to moving the business, because moving tickets and so on and so forth, Tony Khan put out a tweet of 2021 will be like 2024 is the new 2021. And 2021 was obviously consensus was probably the greatest period in AEW, not just product wise, arguably business wise, momentum wise, and perception wise.
They got hot after that summer, after that All Out show.
Yeah.
They got super hot, which carried over for a while.
Exactly. So in order to like the product is one thing, and I do believe in 2024 the creative of the product has gotten a lot better and it's starting to resemble the AEW of old. However, it's now capturing that momentum that they clearly lost. And there are multiple attributing factors. Of course, things like brawling didn't help their perception. You know, the creative, you know, when we talk about people like MJF or certain storylines here and there didn't help the product. But it's all about recapturing that fire they had in 2021. So it's not just about making the talent acquisitions, which I think the talent acquisitions of Mercedes, Okada, and Will Ospreay are equivalent to the Daniels, the Adam Coles, and the Punks. I think those are comparable. However, in terms of like now perception-wise, restoring that feeling of packed out arenas, selling out Arthur Ashe Stadium, what can AEW do to put people in these buildings? I know me and you have discussed some of these collision shows, for example, and a credit to WWE is WWE, when they do the Monday Night Raws and the SmackDowns, every star is available. Every star is featured on that show. Whether Cody will be there, whether it's a segment, whether it's a match, they will be there. Where AEW typically like to rotate their roster. But in the advent of rotating your roster, perhaps you are taking away some of your biggest draws on TV and saving them for another week.
Mm-hmm. We have had this discussion. The thing what I've gathered about AEW when I've read feedback on their shows is that, you know, people have a good time at the shows, the wrestling's always good and stuff like that. The issue that I've seen what people have at these shows is that the big stars are hardly ever at these shows. So if you buy a ticket for a run-of-the-mill Dynamite show, I mean, you ain't going to see the Young Bucks wrestle. But you might see them pop out at some point, but they might not even be on the show. You know, MJF might do a segment. He might be backstage. He isn't going to be. He's a good chance he ain't going to come out there. Kenny Omega, probably ain't going to see him at all. All right.
Yeah.
Moxley is always about, so you're probably going to see John Moxley, although there are weeks when he's not about. But you just don't know what you're going to get with AEW in terms of buying tickets, and these tickets aren't cheap. AEW got really high ticket prices, so you know, you're buying a ticket.
One thing knowledge. Before we continue, make sure everyone in the comment section hit the like button. Make sure you share. Big up everyone in the comment section for tuning in. Yeah, man. You gotta, share this. Tell a friend to tell a friend. You know, big up everyone in the comment section. Sorry, just had to do, put a promotion there. You know, we're wrestling fans. Promo is important.
There you go. But yeah, I mean, with AEW, you just don't know what you're going to get for these shows, and I watch these shows sometimes, and you know me. I watch these some of these collision lineups. When we talk about these collision lineups, I'm appalled by them. The fact that they would advertise some of the matches that they do. There's always a decent main event, but the rest of the card is so run of the mill and so there's so nothing a lot of the times. And if they actually you don't have to even advertise them on television for the time being, but if you advertise locally in the markets that you're in, these people are going to be on the show. All right. Maybe that will entice people to buy tickets. If you advertise dark matches and you do dark matches in the market that are only going to be seen in that arena on that night, that might entice people. If you say, all right, Dynamite, dark, after the show goes off the air or whatever, world title match, Samoa Joe is going to wrestle Kenny Omega for the AEW World title, or you're going to get something really wacky like Adam Cole and Britt Baker against Kenny Omega and Riho, or some, something. It could be a random, could be a wild card match. It could be MJF and Kenny Omega against the Young Bucks. Some random stuff. Just put it out there. Just get people in the building. And they don't do that. They finish their shows off with
MAA in the comment section kind of agrees with me. He said, "Yeah, that's true. I think they should do what they used to do, which is promote matches weeks out."
Yeah, and that's another thing that they used to do. That they do it sometimes. I mean, they've done it for the last couple of weeks, but they used to be really good with advertising shows. You'd get, when Excalibur would do the rundown, you'd get the matches for next week, and then you get a couple advertised for the following week, then one big one for the following week, and they were always fantastic. And now, I mean, God, Tony Khan sometimes tweets, a couple hours before the show starts, a couple matches that are going to be on the show. And who is that helping? That isn't helping them. People aren't going to buy the tickets at this late stage, and sometimes people won't even see the tweet anyway, so they're going to watch the show blind or not watch the show because they don't know what's on it. So, and yeah, WWE, they are really good. WWE are excellent at, everyone is always on their show. Like, it doesn't matter if they're going to work or not, they will be out there in front of the live audience. And it's like that. Obviously, Roman Reigns is different, but I mean, he's like the only one. Seth Rollins is going to be. If I tune into Raw tonight, I'm going to see the usual suspects, which is good, And AEW, you just don't get that at all. You don't get that, and that's and that's another thing as well. These guys, it's not even the wrestlers, it's Tony Khan. You need to get these guys to come to work. You need to be like, yo, FTR, I know you like working Saturdays, but I need you on Wednesdays. I need to advertise Wednesday. Miro, we need you to come in. Like, you stay at home all the time. We need you to come in. Come into Wednesday. I need to advertise you to do whatever. You need to get these guys to come to work. And yeah, it's a nice working environment. The schedule's light, and I get that. And a lot of these, you made these guys a promise when they came to work for you, but yo, we ain't drawing right now. Like, if you want this, we need to get this going, bro. Like, when you started, we were drawing. Now we ain't, and we need to get this pushing right now. So that's something that they really need to get a hand on. I mean, and that's the thing. You ask if Mercedes or Will Ospreay or Okada can fix that. Not to some degree, but the problems are still going to exist if they don't change, because they've got big stars on the roster now. And, these guys, they're not drawing right now. Edge came in a few months ago and it was a nice pop, and, it was fun, and Edge hasn't made a difference. And I like Edge. I will actually openly admit I was wrong about Edge, because I didn't think he should go to AEW. I didn't want to see him, but I think he's really been good. I think he's really been an asset to them. But he hasn't made a difference, and he was a big star. And but once again, when is Edge really ever like, they advertised him last minute for Saturday? He's got a match with Danny Garcia coming up this week, which is good, but I don't think that's a big drawing match either. That's just a nice TV match. That's not going to draw you any. People aren't going to go to the arena for that one, I don't think. But like I said, AEW have got a lot of issues right now. One of them is that. Another one is the perception that they're number two. And sometimes when you're number two, it just doesn't matter what you do. If AEW and WWE are going to be in the same town, people are going to choose WWE. That's where we're at right now. WWE, and it's different because when AEW first popped up, WWE was stale. Their fan base wasn't happy with what they were doing, and that's where AEW came in. And they had something new. They had something fresh. They had really hardworking guys and new faces that people hadn't seen. And now, as time's gone on, the old man has gone from WWE, and the fans really like the show now.
Yeah,
universally like the show that they watch. They're really happy with the television show, and they love what they see. And there's a lot of wrestling on television, and sometimes people just don't have time for number two anymore.
Yeah.
God, if you're a WWE fan, you got 5 hours of first run television that you need to watch every single week. If you want to watch NXT, it's 2 hours, and then you've got the pay-per-views for NXT and WWE, and then AEW. It's 5 hours. That's what is AEW? That's 5 hours as well for AEW. So,
2 hours. 2 hours of Dynamite, 2 hours of Rampage. 2 hours of Collision, 1 hour of Rampage.
Yeah,
On top
obviously
of if
Rampage
it's
isn't essential, but if you want to
yeah.
stay, some good stuff on it sometimes. But it's a lot to be a wrestling fan. The barrier of entry is so big, like to even start even thinking about becoming a pro wrestling fan these days.
Okay, there's a lot of comment sections here to address, so let's bring up all the comments. Okay, big up MAAA. The roster is too big, I think.
It is big. It's
Yeah.
very big.
SDKOA, AEW work too much in cycles. It's hard to care about the wrestlers who work 3-4 months and then disappear.
Yeah.
MAAA. Also heard AEW stop promoting ahead for some matches because a lot of guys have travel issues. So Tony
That's
just
true.
sees who's there and when they arrive on arenas on Wednesday.
That's true. When it comes to weather issues, yeah, that is occasion, but that doesn't happen every week. That's on the real
SDK
occasion.
again. I don't think Okada Monet will do much. The only fix is Tony.
Mm-hmm.
SDK again, as much as I want AW to succeed as well as it can, at one point it focused too much on seeking to be number one and doing what they think will keep fans happy to make them number one. And then another one, AW works best when they just do what they are good at. And then people,
Yeah.
and then obviously, yeah,
And that's something that they've been focusing on for the last few months. And
yeah,
the truth, there's a lot of bad faith people out there who speak on AEW, and they say things about AEW's business model and AEW's success, and they either are very dishonest about it for their own engagement, or they belittle it as not being as successful as it actually is. And AEW as a whole is a tremendously successful wrestling promotion. They have fantastic pay-per-view buys. Every single show they do exceeds expectations. The merchandise it does tremendously well. They have sponsorships which they earn a lot of money from, and the only thing letting them down right now is the gates. But as a whole, the company is tremendously successful, and the TV ratings are good as well.
yeah.
The Wednesday TV ratings are, they used to be fantastic. Over time, they're still really good. They're usually top 3 on Wednesdays. They were number 1 a couple of weeks ago, but last week they were 3rd. They're always top 3. Saturdays, they're usually number 1 or number 2 in the time slot. They do pretty well. Even Friday actually does, actually not that bad, despite what people might tell you. If you look at the landscape of television right now, Wednesday and Saturdays actually ain't even that bad. But as a whole, it's a tremendously successful company. The problem that they have, there are problems. One of them is that the fact that they're just number 2 right now, and WWE is just way too hot. But also, they do need to fix some of these promotional aspects of their business. They really do. Otherwise, you can sign a lot of people, and it's not going to matter.
Yeah. So
that roster is big. Roster is big.
I feel like that roster does need to be trimmed, and I feel like it will. I feel like a lot of contracts will not be renewed. And for good reason as well, because I think the top of that roster is tremendously stacked, and I am excited for a lot of those guys. But some other guys lower down in the card maybe need to go forth and go to other places as well.
They should go. I mean, look at that top of the card. You can't compete with that if you're an undercard guy. And you can look at guys like Danny Garcia and Sammy Guevara and all these guys. It's like Okada coming in, Ospreay coming in. That's just 2 more guys that you got to compete with. That, like, how can you compete with that?
Yeah, I think. Speaking of which, we'll touch on this briefly. Andrew Zarian, on the Matt Med podcast, they alluded to AEW potentially doing stadium shows, and obviously this relates to the whole ticket issue because AEW previously did a stadium show. Arthur Ashe technically counts as a stadium, and they've been able to do. They did tremendous numbers in the initial Arthur Ashe shows, but throughout the years, the numbers have been steady. They've been good, but they haven't replicated the massive sellout that they had in the initial Arthur Ashe show. And obviously, we've been having a whole discourse about AEW ticket sales as a whole. Do you think right now is the right time to do a stadium show? I think in 2021, it probably would have been like the most feasible time because the product was red hot.
2019 would have been the best opportunity. The first show that they did, that they could have sold I think it was like 40-something thousand seats they could have sold for the first show, just with the amount of people they had on the waiting list trying to buy tickets for that show. But they didn't know. How could you know? Otherwise, they would have booked a stadium for that show.
Yeah.
And 2021, there would have been probably a good opportunity. Right now, with the way things are right now, I don't see how they could pull that off. You will get a lot of ticket sales from people going to an AEW stadium show as it's an event and it's the first one, and there will be some hoopla and some mataz around it. But a baseball stadium, probably not a football stadium, a baseball stadium. I don't know if they can do 40,000 these days. But look, I'm looking at this as someone who has obviously looked at the pro wrestling business for a long time, and I mean, for all I know, that in a couple of weeks when these people show up, this is all going to turn around. I doubt it, but it could turn around. And then all of a sudden there might be some huge demand, because at the end of the day, you go to an AEW show, you're going to get the best wrestling product, probably in the world right now. You're not going to get better than that. So that obviously has some sort of value to it, to some degree anyway. But as far as a stadium show right now, I don't know. I'm nervous about them doing Arthur Ashe at this stage. The first one they did really well. They pretty much sold it out. The second one, they put those ticket prices up way too much.
Yeah.
And they I think it was like 14,000 they did. And then the one last year, they didn't do well with that all. They were like 6,000 seats up until like maybe a week before the show, and they had to, reduce prices and get, free tickets out there I think they did like maybe 11,000 that last time they did. So, I mean, they'll still book it this year, because Arthur Ashe Stadium is a really cool place to have wrestling, and it looks fantastic. So they'll do that again. But as far as a stadium, I don't know. What do you think?
I think Arthur Ashe, I think they'll definitely do it again. I feel it's hard to talk about the business end of things, because I think the actual product, week to week product itself, is healing and is, quite frankly, good again. The past couple weeks of Dynamite have been a return to form. And I think the introduction of a Mercedes, and so harken back to the original question, from a business end, we've kind of like spoken about that, but from a product perspective, I feel like an Ospreay tremendously excites me. Within that mix, a Mercedes absolutely excites me. An Okada I'm a bit tentative on, because historically speaking, we've said this a million times. We said this on our Okada stream. Historically speaking, when it comes to the perception of Japanese wrestlers, when it comes to the treatment of Japanese wrestlers in the States, it's not great. Now, largely it was perpetuated by one major force. And in AEW, like, they are treated with some sort of dignity and class. So it's not a disrespect thing. It's just more so, how do you fit a character like Okada onto weekly television? I think it's a formatting issue, where with Okada, he's such an attraction that I'm not 100% confident how he fits into a TV week-to-week format. However, if I'm just looking at it from like a purist perspective in terms of potential matches, the sky's the absolute limit. Like,
my goodness,
sky's the absolute limit. Like, that you have an absorbent amount of riches, and there's such a deep roster that Okada could easily go through. It's just a TV thing, for me, when it comes to Okada. But Ospreay, I think that guy is ready. Like, he is ready for TV.
He's been ready for TV.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I don't. Him coming in, and then you've got Okada, and then Kenny will come back. Do you remember that list of the guys that are out right now in AEW? Do you remember seeing that?
I remember seeing that list. Let me see if I can pull it up. But go ahead.
That's a pay-per-view card by itself. Get that, if you can find that, get that up and read those names out that are out. But if you think about Ospreay coming in, and then you've got Okada, then MJF coming back, and Adam Cole still isn't healthy. But Ospreay coming in, he keeps talking about Wembley, so I'm assuming that he's going to main event Wembley. He's going to be in the world title picture for Wembley. That's what I'd do as well. I'd put the belt on him at Wembley Stadium. All right. I mean, I think that would be just an absolutely fantastic moment in professional wrestling if he wins the world title at Wembley. But then I'm looking at it and I'm like, that roster is so packed. How do you get there? Because right now we've got Hangman, we've got Swerve in the world title picture, and if
Okay, yeah, I've got the list.
go give me the list.
So this is people who are injured and yet on some of them yet to debut. So it's a combination, basically people who aren't currently in the company. All of them are injured, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously Will Ospreay, he's set to debut. Kenny Omega, Kota Ibushi, Shibata, Roosh, Ray Phoenix, Pac, Bandido, MJF, Adam Cole, Keith Lee, Wardlow, Jack Perry, Juice Robinson, Kyle O'Reilly, Mark Davis, and then for the women, Jamie Hayter, Hikaru Shida, Riho, Britt Baker.
What
Yeah, that is a list of people.
That is a scary amount of talent that isn't even available yet.
Yeah.
Holy shit. That is a lot. That's a paper. You can put a pay-per-view together with this.
Oh, easy with those names alone. Absolutely easily.
Crazy card. But
easily.
I was just saying, I think Ospreay is going to main event Wembley. In the world title picture, I can see him winning the world title. That's what I would do, as I'd book him to win the world title at Wembley. All right. But with Okada in the picture and all these other, with Omega coming back, MJF coming back, Adam Cole getting healthy. So how do you even get there? There's just so much. And then with the thing with Swerve right now, because Swerve's hot, and you know, Joe's doing really well as world champion. You cut his legs off and give the belt to somebody else, but then, you know, what if they do really well with the belt?
Yeah.
Then you've got to pass over to Ospreay and August. That's the problem when you've got a stacked roster, though. You know, you've got to really work this out because, damn, that's a lot. That's a lot to think about. There's a lot of people to make happy. It really is.
If Raw isn't getting a major push for the world title, then I would have him be international TNT.
You could, but I think those titles are beneath him at this point. That's what I think. Yeah. I think he comes in and he's a top guy immediately. You set that precedent. You get this guy coming in and he's a main event guy after the world title. That's what I think.
I think it's weird because I feel like now you've debuted Will and Okada, one of them has to be in the title picture, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the more pressing matter right now is Will. In terms of that title picture, especially you brought up Wembley, you saw the coronation. You saw the coronation he got at All In. And I think, you know, him having a marquee match at All In, main event match at All In for the title is the direction he's heading in. With Okada, I think you can kind of, I said this on Revolution Radio, you can kind of pad things out in terms of just give him dream match after dream match or marquee match after marquee match for like several months. You can kind of ride the wave of that. And then maybe like later on in the year or even closer to 2025, you introduce him into the title picture. But there's a lot of guys, even discussing like Dynamite with the triple threat match they've got. All three of those guys alone have a case to walk out as champion. All three guys, you can establish a massive heel with Hangman Page. And I think Hangman Page does need another title run at some point in time. Obviously,
he will. He was fantastic last week.
He was tremendous. Absolutely.
Oh, my goodness.
Tremendous.
He was absolutely fantastic. I tell you what, that heel run, like, you see, that double turn they did last week was so good. And once he finds his feet, because I tell you, once Sting is out of the picture and they put him back with the Bucks, and, you know, Kenny's going to turn heel when he comes back, heel EVP. So I don't see why you wouldn't do it. But those guys as heels, that is going to be some great television.
Yeah. SDK says, I don't believe any titles beneath anyone. Will could easily be a great mid-card champion for the time being if a world title run isn't in his plans for this year. Will Ospreay winning the title Wembley is a must. It's already booked.
I think so too. You see how tweets he puts out about Wembley.
Yeah. I think
he got a promise. He got a promise coming in. Like, you come in, mate. Don't worry about WWE. You come in. You know, you can have this
reestablishing like Hangman. MAA says I think Swerve should be a top heel. At this point, I think Swerve's too over. We saw that on Dynamite. He's way too over. He's
top babyface now, man.
Yeah, he's gotten to a point of like undeniability where by proxy he's just become a face.
Yeah.
And I think Swerve, like, I still have very minor gripes, nitpicks with like some of his presentation choices. For example, like the mascara thing, sometimes the
He
maniacal
didn't have
villain
that
mask.
last week, though.
He didn't have it
He
last
didn't have
week,
that
which
last.
I was fine about. The man,
Holy shit! I don't know what
I
that
don't
was
like
about.
it when he plays a super villain either, but like that's
The
fine.
laugh.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. But when it comes to like big time baby faces, homegrown talent,
Yeah.
that's why for me the whole conundrum of like drawability and like the actual product itself, obviously these two things are interlinked, but sometimes you could put on a great product and just not draw.
Oh, yeah, dude. There's been some fantastic pro wrestling shows over the years that, the truth is, NK, a great pro wrestling show isn't going to help you really in terms of gaining a following. They really won't. Like, a great pro wrestling show is just an icing on a cake, really. It's all about what really matters in a pro wrestling atmosphere, really, in terms of drawing an audience, is your stars. That's really what it is. Man, I tell you what, all right. When WWF and WCW, NWA used to, when they were against each other, they used to routinely book the same arenas on consecutive nights. Okay. And WWE would go in there and they'd have Hogan and Savage and the Warrior and Piper, and they'd go in and they'd have these really shitty shows where no one did anything and the guys didn't want to bump, and Honky Tonk Man, all these guys would go in there and do nothing. And then the following night, you'd have Ric Flair and you'd have Barry Windham going there, and they would have fantastic matches up and down the card with all these guys, the Midnight Express against the Rock and Roll, etc., etc. And then, 2 months later, they'd go back again and WWE be up here, and then the NWA show, they'd lose 2 or 3 thousand people on the return. Just because, and once again, was the show better than the WWF show? 100%. But WWE had the stars. They had Hogan, and and ultimately that's what this is all about. A pro wrestling show, a great pro wrestling show, is never drawn on the fact that it's a pro wrestling show. It's all about your stars. Look at Raw and SmackDown. They've got The Rock this week coming on the television show. There's larger than life stars here. That's what draws money. That always has. ECW was a fine television show. They didn't draw for shit.
There seems to be a sentiment in the comment section that GCW, MLW, XPW, TNA seem to have better creative than AEW currently. I don't watch any of those products, but I think creatively AEW right now is fine.
I haven't watched XPW since it rebranded, but I will say this: I used to watch the TV 20 odd years ago, and I can tell you it was never as good as AEW creatively. It was horrible.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of sensationalism on.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think it's a bit of sensationalism. I think honestly,
I was there.
The product right now, I think the product's been decried for like last year, which rightfully so. But like I said, I think the last 2 months and a bit of AEW, even I'd say Continental Classic onwards, I think the product has been like a great watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I enjoyed the shows. I enjoyed the shows. Some of those shows last year were really hard for me to get through. Like they just weren't for me at all. But MJF went. He's an interesting one when he comes back. That's going to be a real interesting case.
Yeah, I think MJF pivots.
He's not an idiot. You'll know.
No.
He's not an idiot. He knows. He's very online as well. He pays attention to all of this. He knows exactly what the sentiments are about him and what the fears are.
But moving on from AEW, of course, there was a big piece of news that came out when it came to TNA. Scott D'Amore has recently been let go from the TNA company. An article on PW Insider by Mike Johnson, the subtitle, "Why was Scott D'Amore fired?" I'm gonna read a bit of section from the article. There were a lot of people assuming that something salacious had to lead to Scott D'Amore's exit, but we were told by sources close to Anthem that that wasn't the case. While no one is clear as to why the decision was made over the last day, the belief seems to settle on the idea that Len Asper The head of Anthem and Scott D'Amore came to a crossroad when they disagreed on how TNA should be operated, and only one person was going to win that button of heads, and that was Asper.
Yeah. Dave said last week that one of the issues was that Anthem no longer want to spend money on the TNA product, and Scott D'Amore wanted more money invested in the product. There's other stuff going on with this whole thing. There's a lot going on with that whole situation with Scott D'Amore and TNA. I'm not going to talk about it here because I think it's unfair because I don't know all the details on it. We'll just talk about what has been reported. But I mean, if you look at TNA as a whole right now, and they had the big show a few weeks ago, the one that Ospreay and who did Ospreay work on that show? Was it Josh Alexander?
Yeah,
the pay-per-view. Yeah, right. So they had that show and it done really well by their standards. They did like 30,000 buys on that show, which is like really good for TNA. They've had pay-per-views which did 2,000 or 3,000 buys, over the last couple of years. So, they've done really well on that. But, they've brought in this guy. His name's Anthony Ciccone, who's an executive at Anthem, and he's going to be taken over from Scott D'Amore. And ultimately, he's going to be cutting the budget. And he's going to be managing it. He's a bean counter in theory. But, I mean, you can look at TNA and their business and you could see that they're not making money. You could argue that they haven't made money for years. I mean, they don't sell tickets to their shows. Their pay-per-view last one did really well, but before that, they weren't doing really well at all. They don't get sponsorship money from anywhere, really. And, their wrestlers get paid pretty well from what I understand. Those guys are full-time wrestlers. They're not they don't have jobs else like guys in other promotions who work full-time jobs and wrestle on the weekend. They earn a decent amount of money at TNA. So, now we're at a point now where it's like we've got all this money coming out and we don't have anything coming in. So, and D'Amore, from what I understand, wanted to spend more money on production because, you watch Impact, it's a low budget show. And I guess, and I could be wrong, but I guess in Scott D'Amore's mind, he thinks that, more production values, because that's what people see on television. They turn on Raw and they turn on Dynamite and they see high quality production. So the bar in pro wrestling, as far as a television product, the bar is so high. In order for you to compete, you have to spend money to compete at that level. And Anthem weren't willing to spend the money, and you're not making money. So I don't see how you could even think that would be an option for you, really. But then Mike Johnson also reported that he wanted to buy the company, and he presented them with he had financial backing to buy the company. And I don't know what he'd want to buy the company for. What are you getting for it? What are you getting for your money if you buy Impact? Like, no offense to Impact, but you're getting the video library, which is good. But I mean, like I said, what is the point of that? You don't have a TV deal, and you're not going to get one either at this rate. Television wrestling, I mean, WWE.
Why do you think they won't get a TV deal?
They couldn't get a TV deal when the television landscape was a lot brighter 10 years ago. After Spike dropped them, they were shipped on to Destination America, and they were on that hunting channel for a while as well. And now they're on Axis, which is owned by Anthem, but they're not getting paid for that. That's their own station. So they're not going to get any reasonable amount of money from a TV network at this stage because the TV bubble has exploded. I mean, it's where we're at right now with television. That bubble is exploding. That isn't the money that these promotions and these sports were getting a little while ago, that's not going to continue. It will for the NBA and for the NFL and a couple other sports like WWE, and AEW would do well on their re-up this year. But products like Impact, if you weren't going to get money years ago when you had bigger stars, and now you're at a stage now where your production values are lower, your roster isn't as, you got a decent roster, but they mean nothing nationally on a big level. You ain't going to get money now for that. They're not going to buy your show. So, D'Amore loved his TNA, he really did, but it's where it is. It's where it is. I don't even think they're the third biggest pro wrestling group in America right now. What is it? It'd be obviously New Japan draw more than them in America. New Japan draw way more than TNA, and their TV ratings are pretty much the same. So I'd say that they're the fourth. and they're not gonna improve in any way. And it's not a knock on them because the show is what it is. But like I said, the barrier of entry for pro wrestling is so high. I don't see how they could improve this. People just don't have time. I don't have time.
Yeah. I feel when it comes to, I'm not going to speak on the TNA products. I don't watch the product, but I feel like from the articles I've read in terms of Scott Demore wanting to invest more money in the product and them ultimately releasing his Scott Demore because of his like ambition when it comes to that finances and probably other departments as well
that we know of,
that we know of
right now.
What impact do you think this has on TNA going forward? Because finances, like whether we like it or not as consumers, the finances of the business affect the products we watch. If AEW was to lose a TV deal, it affects their ability to re-sign talent, it affects the ability to book venues. Do you know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, we can watch things as consumers, but as it's a business, and the business affects the products we are going to watch. So if everything is to be believed that it's a budgetary issue and our budgetary constraints, what happens now? Because as you mentioned, TNA talent are paid pretty well. Does that mean now, in terms of acquiring new talent, the budget for talent acquisition goes down, or the budget to pay the talent goes down? And heck, what does what does like TNA being more financially constrained mean for the company?
Well, when I think of being more financially responsible, I immediately think of the talent, and I immediately think, okay, this guy, if we lose wrestler X and he leaves and he goes to work elsewhere, is it going to affect us in any way in terms of ticket sales or TV? And the answer is no. It's really not. Like, if Moose leaves, for example, it's not going to affect TNA in any way in terms of the actual television program and the actual business. So I can see that happening. But, from what I understand, a lot of these wrestlers love Scott Demore. They love the guy. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of them ask for their releases and some of them will leave, which is fine for Anthem as well, because that means they ain't got to pay you. So, you got to look at like that's another way to look at. Another way you got to look at is we don't know what this Anthony Ciccone is going to be at Impact in terms of, is he going to be hands-on or is he going to be hands-off? There are examples in wrestling of executives from the outside coming in and either really having no clue about pro wrestling and jumping in and being like, oh, I think we should do this or whatever. And then you've got other examples of wrestling, people coming to wrestling and they're staying away because they don't understand. So they leave it to the wrestling people. So we don't know. He could be Jim Herd, who never watched wrestling and comes in with all these crazy ideas. Or he could be Kip Fry, who just comes in and be like, hey, I don't know about wrestling, so you guys can teach me about wrestling, and I'll stay over here and do the money, and I'll do the books, and you guys book the wrestling show because I really don't care what you guys do. You guys know better than me. So we don't, we don't know what Saccone's going to be like as far as managing the actual product on television. Dreamer's still there in charge of creative with Hunter Johnson and what's the other guy? It's what's his name again? Oof. What's the other guy in the Impact? What's his name? R.D. Evans, that's his name. R.D. Evans. So those three guys are still there. But Tommy Dreamer, I remember when Tommy Dreamer had OVW years ago, when he went for WWE and he was the head booker at OVW and he was so bad, they took him off immediately. His ideas were so wacky, because people got this misconception that he learned from Paul Heyman. But he had this thing where, yes, I saw Navy's put in, he wanted Ric Flair to be, Jim Herd wanted Ric Flair to be Spartacus. He wanted Ric Flair to dress up as a gladiator. Ric Flair, because he didn't know. He was like, yeah, that's a great idea for this guy to dress up as a gladiator. But yeah, Tommy Dreamer, there's a misconception that he's learned everything from Paul Heyman. But, when he was in charge of OVW, a lot of people, especially in WWE, were like, this guy didn't learn anything from Paul Heyman because he looks like Vince Russo.
So you mentioned that, like, obviously you spoke about like the viability of like TNA in terms of like, the way television rights are and so on and so forth. People have obviously speculated what's Scott D'Amore's next move. People have said he should be in AEW, maybe run the women's division, maybe run the ROH.
There's no role for him in AEW because Tony does all that. And Tony's not going to give it up for Scott D'Amore.
But do you think? But do you think he should?
No, not Scott D'Amore. No, I say that I'm not a big fan of the stuff that I saw in Impact. The wacky ideas and stuff. You can look at Tony Khan's TV show, and there's no undead realm and all that stuff. He's not into stuff like that in AEW. The House of Black is as far as it goes, and I remember when Malachi Black left, when he got fired from WWE, and he was telling us about all these ideas that he had that he presented to Vince McMahon. They were just so off the wall. I can imagine him doing the same with Tony Khan. If Tony Khan actually manages to just keep those guys in check without having anything too wacky.
Scott D'Amore would be a great asset to ROH as opposed to Keith TK.
I think he could be, but I don't know what Tony Khan wants to do with Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor as a presentation is confuses me anyway. If he's going to be serious about it and he maybe books them away from the actual AEW arenas and he has a defined roster, well, then maybe someone could take charge of that and book it correctly. But I don't know what Tony Khan is doing with Ring of Honor besides having it on the books, and he makes money from doing the pay-per-view every 3 or 4 months. But he's not going to give up. He's not going to give that up for Scott D'Amore.
Yeah, Scott D'Amore is good with talent, but he's not an amazing booker.
I agree with Navy. I don't think he's an amazing booker, but you know what he's got, and he's had this for years. And I'll say this about Scott D'Amore. Scott D'Amore is a people's manager, which is something that every promotion really needs. Someone who the talent likes, they'll listen to, and he can get the most out of talent, which is these days in wrestling is pretty rare. So if they wanted to get him in for that, I could understand that, but I wouldn't get him in to be a booker. I mean, I'd prefer to give someone in AEW that's already there a shot at being a booker. I don't know who that would be, but there's got to be guys there that have got some sort of brain on them that could book Ring of Honor without having to get to Scott D'Amore in.
First.
What about you? What do you think?
I don't really have a strong opinion on Scott D'Amore. I barely watch Impact as it is. I'll keep it. I have an opinion of him. Obviously, he's well revered. I'm not saying that in jest. Like, he's well revered by people who watch the product. I just don't watch his product, so I can't, in good faith, say, "Hey, my man should book this product" when I don't watch his product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, yeah.
I personally can't do it. If people want to do that, who are more familiar with him, that by all means they should.
They had a really rough time, TNA, in terms of just what they were handed, what Anthem were handed when they bought that company. Yeah. I mean, I tell you what, they got a piece of fucking shit when they bought that company, and I don't know how they ever expected to succeed. They were on national television at one point, and I mean, God, you talk about a company that threw everything away. They threw everything away for nothing.
Yeah, I want to even touch on that. Obviously, we can't go on to like the whole history of like TNA's downfall, TNA's like fall from grace from where they could have been. But like, what we know, obviously, the Dixie Carter regime wasn't a great regime. How much impact did that have on TNA's perception going forward?
I had a lot of had a really bad perception on they couldn't get a TV deal. They left Spike Television under a cloud of, I would say, disappointment, but it was a lot of controversy when they left Spike. This is a conversation for another time, but I mean, they had a really good deal and a relationship with Impact Wrestling. I mean, with Spike TV, did TNA. They had a really good relationship at one point, and Spike TV even chipped in for some of the talent. In terms of paying for some of the talent they did back then. However, there's a lot of things that happened. A lot of it involved Vince Russo. And like I said, it's another conversation for another time because this is a long thing. Yeah. But, one of the reasons why they weren't renewed was to do with the fact that Dixie Carter insisted on having Vince Russo and not changing the product. I really can't go into this now.
Yeah.
Keep this in mind. Maybe we could have a whole discussion about the old regime of TNA because I know it very well. But put it this way, they had a really good relationship with Spike. They got kicked off. And then after that, no television network wanted to touch them. And it wasn't to do with
they bounced around from like a network like Destination America. They
went to Spike TV. And their ratings on Spike were all right. They were fine. They were fine. At that time, they were like 1.5 million viewers a week, which was at that time it was fine. Nowadays if you get 1.5 million viewers a week, you'd be fucking it'd be incredible. But back then, it was a good number, and it was a steady number. And with that kind of number, you should be able to get a TV deal somewhere else, but they couldn't. Networks didn't want to touch them because of the perception that company had. From the creative standpoint, and also the owner, they had a really bad reputation in wrestling, Dixie Carter and TNA. And eventually they went to Destination America, and by the end they were on a hunting channel towards the end. And they went from 1.5 million viewers a week, and towards the end they were doing like 200,000 towards the end. And then Anthem bought them, and now they're on Access Television, and they do 90,000 people a week, and they do a 0 rating. It's a totally flat TV rating, and it's a shame because Don Callis and those guys and Scott D'Amore, they really worked hard to try and get that perception up. But it's a losing battle at the end of the day. AEW are there now, New Japan tour, the US often and stuff. There's you're behind an 8 ball when you're TNA. What can you do? What can you do at this point? If they could have the best promotion in the world in terms of the best TV, the best matches, and it still wouldn't matter at this stage, unfortunately for them.
I'm objectively balanced and on the ball. TNA has never been prime on national TV. And all Scott D'Amore did was change the name back to TNA. Nothing changed.
They were on Spike TV every Thursday from 8 till 10 for many years. Like I said, they had they had like 1.5 million viewers every week, and they would do pay-per-views where they did 8,000 buys. Could you imagine, NK, having a TV show that did 1.5 million viewers every week, and you sold 8,000 of them you convinced to buy your pay-per-view? Think about that.
Yikes.
Yeah. AEW does about 850, 900. They do like about 140 to 150 pay-per-view buys just off of that number. Think about that.
Yeah, that is nuts. That is. Listen,
that's the creative, and that's the creative at the end of the day. And she kept that team.
Yeah,
she got that team for years and years and years. She was loyal to them. I'll give her that, but she shouldn't have been.
She was a what? Sorry,
she was loyal to them. I'll give them that. I'll give her that, but yeah, she shouldn't have been. Unfortunately for her, nice lady. Apparently, people say she's a really nice lady.
It's just at the end of the day, when it comes to like the wrestling business, it's the business. Like it's these things, like just like anything, have an effect on the product, and we can because I grew up liking certain aspects of TNA, the X division, so on and so forth. But do you think those business decisions, like from that bygone era, are still the thing that's hurting TNA today? Because TNA, as a product, people still like the products. There has it's pretty well rated online by its fan base and community. But in terms of, do you think the damage has been done on the business front?
Yeah, because look where they are. Look where they are, and I don't mean it harsh. I wish that they were doing really well, and I wish they were on national TV. I wish a lot of promotions were on national TV just for a healthy wrestling business. But look where they are, man. Like, in 2010, they were 2011 or 12 or whatever it was. Like, they were on national TV, or they're on cable television on a really high-rated network, and look at them now. And it's a shame. Like I said, their rating, was it like 2 or 3 weeks ago? It was 0. It was a flat, just like a 0 rating, and it's a shame. It's a shame, but either way, it's going to be interesting watching TNA going forward, just because of how Saccone deals with it and what changes he makes. Is he going to release a lot of these wrestlers? Is he going to? He's not going to. They're not going to put more money in it. But I mean, it's going to be interesting going forward to see how they manage that.
One last question before we wrap up: Do you think TNA gets bought, and is there value in it being bought by obviously it'd have to be one of the major two?
The video library's got value to it.
Yeah.
But I don't know why you'd want to buy TNA. I mean, what you're buying. It's like Scott D'Amore. It's like you're not buying a TV. I mean, you're not buying a promotion with a TV slot. So you're buying, some trademarks, tainted at that. Some rings. I don't know how many rings they got. So you're buying that. Some contracts, some wrestlers that you may not want. The most valuable thing they have is a tape library.
Yeah.
And I mean, if
But in an
AEW,
era of streaming, though, that tape library is extremely valuable, don't you think?
they've got it they've got it online. I mean, you can sub to it now, but I don't know if anyone does. I mean, how many people can subscribe to that streaming service as we speak now? You know, it can't be that many people. But if WWE bought it, it would just be a tab on their network, I suppose. If Tony had it, I mean, I suppose he could incorporate it with the Ring of Honor tape library as well. So I mean, that's something that he'd want to have, and he could sell it on. You know, the HBO they've got this new sports streaming thing, which we can talk about another time. But there's a massive all these TV networks are coming together with a new sports streaming service, which is going to be tremendously expensive. But you know, TBS are going to be a part of it, and TBS. I mean, that's a great opportunity for AEW to get on that with the Ring of Honor tape library to throw in there as well. So if they had the TNA tape library,
it'd be another
thing you could sell, rent out to that streaming service. So there is value in that. But as far as buying the promotion, I wouldn't want to buy the promotion.
Yeah.
Like, you know, Toby Keith wanted to buy TNA years ago. You know, he passed away last. Yeah, he was going to buy. He went to Bob Carter's house, and he was going to buy TNA. The problem was
wasn't Billy Corgan interested as well?
Yes, Billy Corgan. It was around that time. Billy Corgan wanted to buy it. Toby Keith wanted to buy it, but Bob Carter wanted Dixie to remain in charge, and Toby Keith didn't want that. He wanted Jim Ross to head up TNA at that point. Toby Keith. Yeah, and when Jeff Jarrett had Global Force Wrestling,
I remember that. Wow.
Yeah, he was interested in that. He told Jeff Jarrett, "You get TV, you know, I'll definitely invest." But poor Jeff, he couldn't get TV at that time. It was tough back then. But Toby Keith, that's my Toby Keith wrestling story. He was going to buy TNA.
Yeah. So I guess the main takeaway before we wrap up in this, I guess, like the most important asset to a wrestling company right now is having a TV deal.
That's where your money comes from these days.
Yeah.
Look at WWE. Look how much money they get. AEW don't get a lot of money as of right now, because when they signed their TV deal, they were green, but no one knew what they were. They'll get an increase this year when they re-up with. I'm sure they'll stay with Warner Brothers.
Those negotiations have been in place for like years now. I know people said they were supposed to sign a new deal. There was a lot of speculation that they were going to sign. Yeah.
I mean, they're going to sign it in the next. I'm sure we'll get an announcement in the next few months, maybe over the summer, of them re-upping with Time Warner. Warner Brothers Discovery, excuse me. It used to be Time Warner. I'm sure that there'll be some sort of announcement. But yeah, that's where the money comes in pro wrestling. It's not from your gate, although you do make money on your gate and you make money from your pay-per-views, but it's all from your TV deals right now. WWE, they don't need to fucking sell another ticket. They don't need to sell another ticket. They can put out, doesn't matter what they put out, their TV money is so strong for the next God knows how many years. Yeah, they're going to be fine. But yeah, that's where we're at in wrestling.
That's the business, man. I'll just go through these last comments and then we will be out of here. So I remember
Navy said, I remember being in India years ago, and Impact was hot there. They were really popular in India. Jeff Jarrett did that, actually. He got them a TV deal in India, and they even had a TV series in India. I can't remember, was it Ring King or something or other it was called? I don't remember, but they had their own Impact Wrestling show out there, separate from the Impact TV show elsewhere.
Let me see. Okay. Yeah, but WWE still getting 5 million back then, and then AEW be over 2 million. I think he's talking about when Impact on TV.
Dude, if AEW with their current numbers now, if you put them back, I actually read the number that they would have back then, and it was like 2.3 million. It was like a really like big old number.
In terms of overall viewership.
Yeah, if we exported, this was like 2022 AEW, but it's like if you exported them to 2009 with that number to 2009, 2010, their numbers would have been really good.
Yeah,
like really good. Maybe even more. It might be 2.7. I'll have to find the article.
Yep, AEW is easy doing 100K plus every pay-per-view
on the low end. Yeah,
on the low end. Yeah. Cable declined 20% last year alone due to cord cutting, which means 800K equals 1 million now.
Who is that? I'm objectively balanced and
I'm objectively balanced and on the ball.
You're tremendously on the ball, Mr. I'm objectively balanced, because that is very true. Declined 20%.
Yeah, in fact, I'm objectively balanced and on the ball. I think I haven't seen you on the channel before.
Me neither.
Yeah, if this is your first time watching Big Up Super, if you've been on the channel, let us know in it, because it's the first time seeing you.
Yeah, very true. The good stuff.
Yeah, man. And then man, but big up everyone who's tuned in to the first edition of Commissioner's Corner. Like I said, if you want a bit more discussions on the ins and outs of the business, come over here, we'll have a good time. I hope it was entertaining for you lot. I love talking about the nitty gritties, the ins and outs of the business, TV deals, all of this nerdy stuff. So,
and I love talking about David Von Erich. So if you guys want more David Von Erich, let me know. I can tell you more.
Oh, we're definitely gonna do some Von Erich's based content, because I feel like give the people a teaser of your thoughts on the Iron Claw movie. I've yet to see it. I hate
it. I'm a huge Kerry Von Erich fan. I adore Kerry Von Erich. And they made him come across as some local mixtape rapper. Just some regular nigga.
That movie potentially might win an Oscar. I'm just letting you know.
They ain't winning no motherfucking Oscar. If it was, it might. I don't know. It was a good. The acting was good. So Lloyd was telling me, how much he loved the way it's shot, and I get that. But as far as the story, they made Kerry look like such a. They made all the Von Erichs look local. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so for you, they didn't capture the scope of how big of stars of Von Erichs were.
There was a shot of Kevin in a diner with his girlfriend, who would later be his wife, and they're eating in this diner. That couldn't have happened. That was impossible. Kevin Von Erich could not sit in a diner and eat. It wouldn't happen. He couldn't walk down the street. The Von Erichs could not walk down the street. They were famous, bro. Like the Von Erichs could walk into car dealerships and take cars and go, I'm gonna take this real quick. I'll bring it back later. That's the kind of shit they could do. But you watch the movie and there's just regular niggas, just regular dudes. There's a bunch of guys in cowboy hats and boots, But yeah.
So in fact, let's do this. If you want to know more about the Von Erichs, if the people out here want to know more about the Von Erich story, where should they go? What sort are there any particularly noteworthy pieces of articles? Are there any documentaries? Where should they go for definitive Von Erich?
Irv Muchnick had an article in Penthouse magazine in 1988. That was a fantastic breakdown. You could Google that. And Dave Meltzer.
Repeat the article, sorry, again.
Irv Muchnick wrote a story on the Von Erichs in Penthouse magazine in 1988, which is available online. You could just Google Irv Muchnick, Von Erichs Penthouse, and you'll find it. And obviously, Dave Meltzer, Wrestling Observer, wrote tremendous bios on Kerry Von Erich when he died in 1993, and Fritz when he died in 1997. And also, Dave did an Iron Claw review a few weeks ago, which pretty much gave you the entire breakdown of the Von Erich family as well, which is really good. So I'd recommend those. But yeah, watch the movie. It's a good film in terms of the acting's fantastic.
Yeah,
but I hated it. It's just I'm a big stickler for historical accuracy.
Anything, for historical accuracy, take it with a pinch of salt. But as a film, I've heard great things about it, and I'm telling you, don't be surprised. Don't be surprised when they send the Oscar nominations and it's in that Academy, because you can see it. You can see it. I'm just letting you know. Trust me.
No, look, I'm happy. Yeah, if more people understand the Von Erichs and see them, well, then great. I think there was such a long time ago. Yeah. It's nice that people are interested. I get asked about the Von Erichs every day these days. But have you ever heard of the Von Erichs? Like my father-in-law asked me, "You ever heard of the Von Erichs?" I was like, yeah, kind of. I'm probably the leading Von Erich historian in the UK. Probably.
Oh, hey, listen.
They should have had me on this morning talking about the Von Erichs. I'm telling you, I should have been on the couch with Allison and Dermot talking about the Von Erichs, bro.
Hey man, let's make it happen, man. You know what? The goal is to make
me to meet Allison and them.
Yeah, to get you on this morning talking about the Von Erichs and any noteworthy stuff. Oh my gosh.
That's
Imagine if they make a Montreal Screwjob movie. This guy would hate it.
Oh gosh, don't get me started. We'll talk about that in November. So we're back. So we're back next week, right?
Yeah, we're back next week, man. Yeah, man. This has been
Monday.
the first edition of the Commissioner's Corner. Let us know down in the comment section what you thought. And hey, if there's some topics, some either historical wrestling topics you want us to talk about, or some current affair stuff that you really want broken down, let us know in the comment section down below. We're here to break down and dissect all of this stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But
Any people stories, let me know. We can talk about it.
And definitely, man. But yeah, this has been Commissioner's Corner. I've been your host, NK. It's been Knowledge. We are signing out. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.